Joining us now are Ashley Kurth, a teacher at Stoneman Douglas, also Kent Friesen, who taught at Columbine, and former Sandy Hook Library clerk Mary Ann Jacob. Ashley, I want to start with you. You sheltered, I think, 65 students in your classroom last week during the shootout. You're a registered Republican. You voted for Donald Trump. You're a strong Second Amendment supporter. Do you wish you had had a gun last week? Do you want to be armed moving forward and trained?
I can honestly say no. Before the events that took place on Wednesday, I might have had a different sense of opinion, and I was one of those teachers that, some of the other schools I worked at thought maybe, having an arm or something that would deter them would have any type of impact. But it's one thing to have those thoughts and to think, in the thought of a crisis, that I could be the one to stand up and maybe help protect these kids or do something more and stand up. And it's another thing when you have them just running screaming at you. I could not imagine trying to figure out where, if I was armed in a realistic world, if it's strapped to my side. And I teach culinary, where I'm essentially trying to teach the kids how not to, cut their hands when they're using knives, that I would have a sidearm strapped to me that I would have to pull out. And as I'm pulling kids into my room and stuff like that, then having to figure out, okay, flip the switch to law enforcement brain function and then say, okay, where's the shooter? Where are my options? If I fire, am I going to be nervous enough that I'm going to hit another kid, and then that's going to be another issue to deal with? And on top of which, with all of that, it came to reality of all the fights and stuff that we break up at schools, and just the kids themselves going off on each other for social media. I mean, they're children that have strong emotional reactions that we deal with on a daily basis, of a boyfriend broke up with them on Twitter, or they're upset of a grade that they got, and they go through floods of emotions in an instant. And having somebody on school campus that is armed, I mean, our SRO officer was in the front, and we all knew that he was there. But in the same instance, if there were more people that had that around when fights are getting broken up or anything like that, or even a live shooter on and we're trying to find this person, our first priority is to the students and getting them safe. I mean, that's the first thing I reacted to. I just started grabbing kids because it was like looking at my 7-year-old son. Yeah.
Mary Ann, I mean, as she was just saying, the adrenaline one faces in a, what the military refers to as a kinetic environment like this, when there's shooting going on, nobody knows how they're going to respond until they actually respond. And soldiers and police are trained for months and months and months. You helped shelter 19 fourth graders at Sandy Hook Elementary. You warned other teachers and students of the active shooter situation. Do you think teachers should be armed?
Oh, absolutely not, Anderson. I think, especially listening to the story that we just heard from that happened last week in Florida, and the fact that the trained guard, who was trained policeman with a firearm, wasn't even able to react. Imagine, by just paying a stipend to a teacher, that you expect them to be able to respond in a situation like that, like a trained sharpshooter. In an elementary school, if you're in a classroom with 20 first graders, what do you put one of the 6-year-olds in charge when you go out to engage the shooter and hope that they're safe while you're gone? Our first responsibility when we're in a classroom with children is to keep them safe. And I know, I'm confident in the situation we were in Sandy Hook, that every single teacher did everything they could to keep those children safe. And if anybody, including a guard, had a weapon, they would have been gunned down by the shooter in our situation, who had an AR-15 and was able to shoot, 190 some odd bullets in under 3 minutes. I mean, who could survive that barrage?
Kent, 19 years ago, Columbine, you helped shelter students in classrooms. You helped administer first aid to gunshot victims. Where do you land on this?
Well, it's the same as the other two ladies said. I mean, there's no reason for us to have a gun. We're not trained. We don't have the liability. And that's the least of our worries. But our first and foremost thing is to take care of our children, the children we have in our classroom. We were trained to at least lock down and try and keep them calm and trying to keep them safe and make sure that they're okay. But to strap on a gun for this, we don't have the training. I mean, let's put it this way: the SRO officer did not do his job. What would a teacher, how they react to that? We had an SRO officer, and it was very difficult for him to react. So it all happens, it just happens that many of them don't know how to take care of, what to do. Who knows what's going to happen?
Ashley, if there were, guns in classrooms, in a lockbox with the bullets separate, and you have students of all different ages in various classrooms, do you think it's inevitable that somewhere at some time some student is going to get a hold of a gun and play around with it?
I mean, I work in a classroom where I have knives that I keep locked up. The kids get them out, they use them during class, and then they get locked up. And they're kids, and they mess around with them, and you continuously have to keep reminding them, you have to walk properly with it, you have to hold it properly, you have to utilize it properly. So do I think that they'll mess with an arm? Yes, I fully think that they would. They're kids. They like to see stuff on TV, and they interact with it, and they're curious. No matter what their age, they are curious. Even the ones that are they're raised with families that have guns and they know gun safety, and they go hunting with their family and stuff like that. I mean, they know to respect it. But at the same instance, some of them just get very highly emotional, and it's not their fault that they do it. They're human and they're children. So having something like that in their vicinity and access, I don't think is a very smart idea.
Marianne, in the wake of the Sandy Hook tragedy, the reaction from the NRA was more guns in schools. Does it surprise you that this idea has now come back again 5 years later?
It doesn't surprise me that the president is talking about it. Everyone else that I know and that I've heard and that I see on TV is outraged by it. But as long as we allow the NRA leadership to dictate policy, we're going to have this issue. I don't believe the average gun owner in this country thinks it's a good idea. My family has guns in our home. My sons and my husband are avid sportsmen. We believe in the Second Amendment, but we believe that gun ownership comes with grave responsibility. And every gun owner I know believes that. So, to talk about the NRA as if it's all of the people who belong to it versus the NRA leadership, I think are two very different things.
That's a good point.
So, I don't understand why, as a country, we're allowing this narrative to dictate policy, because we know that as gun ownership has increased in this country, so have deaths by guns. So clearly that is not working for us. We need to change it. And every single person watching this show tonight needs to get involved. I just heard from one of your previous guests that voting for people who support gun violence prevention measures makes a difference. We have to stop tweeting what we think and doing it.
Kent, do you think real change is possible? Physical action, you're saying. Kent, do you think real change is possible?
Physical action.
No, really, I don't. Columbine was almost 20 years ago. And as soon as we had Columbine happened, there were many of us teachers that prayed and prayed that this would be the end. But in light of things, we knew it was just going to be the beginning of things. It hasn't stopped. There's been no major legislation. Nothing seems to work. We throw on more AR-15s on the market, more AK-47s on the market. It doesn't seem to stop anywhere. Now, I do know that there needs to be a bigger and better mental health program where they will be able to identify who might be a risk person for guns.
That doesn't, but there's still people that are doing that. It's valuable. There are people who are in charge of vetting that. People are human. Humans make mistakes.
Well, correct. I agree humans make mistakes, but I don't think enough money is being allowed to go into the mental health program in order to find out who are these people, identify these people, and be able to help law enforcement identify them. But also,
but you know what? None of these things are going to solve the problem individually.
No.
They all need
Correct.
to be worked on. This is like
Correct.
saying, well, let's not have speed limits because there's still people who don't drive the speed limit. We know that prevention of accidents is because there's graduated licensing laws, and there's airbags, and cars are made safer, and there's speed limits. Every single one of those things is a contributing factor to the fact that we have lower deaths by cars, per person.
Yeah, it's
and
the combination.
The same thing with this: background checks, safe storage, better mental health. laws that prevent guns from being in the hands of the wrong people.
Yeah.
All of those things together are going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And if our lawmakers can't support that, we need to vote them out.
Yeah. I want to thank you all for this
And
discussion.
we have a large amount of kids that are in the process of doing that.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank
These
you
kids
Good
will
for
not
them.
be stopped.
for this discussion. It's an important one,
I hope
and
so.
appreciate all you've done for educating America's kids.